$843. That's what your app shows. Not how much you saved, just what's left. You're sitting in your car, still making payments on it, parked in front of a pharmacy, debating whether you can put off filling your prescription yet again. You think you can. You've been thinking that for a month now. You're 24, and your debt is a number you won't say out loud anymore because saying it makes it real in a way you can't handle, especially not on a Tuesday night. You pay the minimum on a credit card. Your landlord just emailed you about a rent hike and signed the message warmly. That word still buzzes around your head. Warmly. This isn't poverty, you're sure of that. Knowing doesn't really help, but you know it. On paper, you make enough that nobody would call you struggling, which just means you struggle in a category with no name, no playbook, and no one talking about it for real. You've got a job, a degree, $843 in your account, and a prescription you'll push to next week.
You know every trick in the grocery aisle. Price per ounce, store brand versus the brand you actually want, exactly which pasta shape comes cheapest at your grocery store. Stuff you wish you'd never had to learn. Nobody at work talks about this. You all just act fine, like it's a game you're all playing and you've silently agreed to keep playing. You bring lunch from home and pretend you prefer it. You skip happy hours and say you have other plans. You don't. Most nights you're alone with a spreadsheet pushing numbers around for 40 minutes, searching for $200 you already know isn't there. This is the floor. It isn't dramatic, not a heartbreak, not a dinner party story. It's just relentless arithmetic, not quite enough, grinding under everything you do.
Then you land a better job, $52,000 a year. On the drive home, you feel relief, maybe. Something like hope, at least, until you sit down and run the numbers. You're taking home $3,100 a month. Rent's $1,340. Car payment, whatever good feeling you had fades before you finish your spreadsheet. But something's different now. You can cover things. Barely, but you do. You pay off a credit card, $2,100. Just like that, zero balance. You screenshot it, but don't share it with anyone. Not sure what you'd even say. You save it in a hidden folder on your phone for the moments that matter quietly. Victories you can't explain without ruining them. That folder is proof you're surviving. It's more important than you admit. Savings crawl up. $4,000, $6,500, 19 months without slipping backwards. Which doesn't sound like much until you remember how often you used to fall behind. Your car breaks down. You need a root canal. You take the hits and recover. Coming back is new.
One day you break $10,000 and you're 27. You keep checking the balance, not just from anxiety, but because you've never seen 5 figures in your account that weren't debt. And some part of you expects to wake up and find out it was a mistake. So you start reading. Not vague advice, actual stuff about the market, indexed funds, why fees matter for the long run. You open a brokerage account and let it sit for weeks before putting cash in. You deposit $1,800, the market tanks the following day. You almost pull it out. 4 days, hand hovering over the trigger until you finally just leave it. That's the call you make. Not discipline, really. More like freezing in place until it works out. You're 29, salary's up to $71,000, savings at $38,000. You're funding a Roth IRA. By every personal finance checklist, you're crushing it. But then one night you run the projection. Income, savings rate, 40 years out. The number it spits out is enough, or at least it's fine. Enough that your 19-year-old self would have found it laughable.
That gap between enough and what you actually want isn't just a feeling. You can measure it now. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. So you start hustling on the side. No brand, no announcement. A service using the same skill you sell for your employer, but this time for yourself. First month, $280. Third month, $700. By month 8, $1,500. You put all the earnings back in, don't switch up your routine. You skip a trip, miss out on a concert, turn down a dinner. A few of those you could have actually afforded, but you wanted something else more. Time. Or what time becomes when you stop trading it for a paycheck. Your net worth crosses $90,000, then $130,000. You start to see how far the side gig is taking you beyond where your salary ever would. That's not a prize, really, more like seeing proof. The math holds up, so you collect proof, quietly. Eventually, there's a month your side income is bigger than your regular paycheck. You say nothing.
You just sit with it in your car for 10 minutes after work, then drive home. Some wins don't need applause.
You're 33, net worth $220,000. There's a rental property, a brokerage account, earning while you sleep, while you drive, while you're out making small talk in rooms you barely care about. You start saying no more often. No to random pitches, group trips not on your budget, networking you don't care for. People notice. A few take it personally. You don't know how to explain that it's not them, you just started choosing differently. You lose $6,700 on an investment you believed in. Doesn't destroy you, but you feel it. You rebalance and move forward. Not instantly, not easily, but you do. Around $400,000, you notice a shift. It isn't dramatic. One day you just see that money stopped being the weather and became something like a tool. Now you're deciding where it goes, not just reacting. The parking lot feels distant, like something that happened to someone else. At 37, you cross $1 million. It happens during a Wednesday meeting you aren't even really in. The notification pops up. You look at your phone, put it down, finish the call. Later, sitting in the parking structure, you wait for that big feeling, closure, satisfaction. But really, there's nothing. Not unhappiness, not joy. You just finally get that the number itself was never the point. Hitting $1 million is just proof that the plan works. Now it's time to see how far it can go.
So you keep moving forward. Turns out the goalpost moves, just like you thought it would. You knew and you did it anyway. You stop going to all those networking events, the startup weekends, the finance seminars where people talk louder than they listen. It's not that those rooms are useless, you just don't need them anymore. Now your conversations are smaller, more honest, with people who've been through it too. At $2.1 million, money is just a resource, like time, like attention. You stop caring about your checking account. You focus on how everything's positioned, what the returns are, what's missing. You hire a wealth manager, then you fire them when you realize they're just there to soothe you, not to help you think. You find someone smarter, quieter, less busy trying to look impressive. You take 17 days off. You don't check work email for 6 of them. Those 6 days, those are what you couldn't buy 10 years ago. Not the trip, the freedom inside those 6 days. By $5 million, you're not working for capital, you're working alongside it. That phrase sounds like something you hear at a conference, but it's real. You're in a deal that'll bring in $600,000 in 14 months, another that might earn 0. You hold both because now you understand the relationship between them. At $843, you couldn't have seen this dynamic. You meet people at 30 million, 50 million, and you notice it's not about what they have, it's how they think. They're playing for a longer horizon. They're fine with uncertainty. They're not trying to win the big hand, they're just sticking around longer than anyone else, which is how this game is really played. Now you're at 18 million and you're in rooms you only used to read about, but it's mostly functional. People want your input because it's useful, not as a favor. That means more than you'd expect. Your reputation starts to move ahead of you. People know your name. Doors open before you get there. Reputation is capital too. It earns in the background, just like the rest. Not every decision feels good. A portfolio company lays off 80 people. You know the founder, you've eaten dinner with their family, but you hold your position. The numbers improve, the investment appreciates. The gap between you and the consequences is wider now. You don't pretend not to notice, you just stop spending energy performing concern you don't actually feel. At $40 million, you're building structures meant to outlive you. A trust, a foundation. Things that will keep running after you're gone. It sits with you, even if it feels odd. You give more now, every year, more than ever. Yes, sometimes it's for access, a seat at the table, a name on a building. No point pretending otherwise. But there's something else, too. Up here, money doesn't measure all that much anymore. Giving is one of the last choices that actually costs something. And cost, real cost, is what you're after. Everything cheap feels empty. Now you're 58 with $91 million. 4 people know the exact number. You haven't worked a normal job in 8 years, but you never stopped working. Your perspective stretches over decades, not quarters. You make mistakes. Mistakes just mean a position underperforms and you rebalance. Life doesn't fall apart. That still feels surprising sometimes. There's a meeting. 6 people, enough capital in the room to matter where it counts. You ask a question. The meeting shifts and moves around it. You leave before the meal comes. You don't care about the show, just the mechanism. And somewhere right now, a 24-year-old sits in her car in front of a pharmacy, watching her app blink $843. She's thinking it's a story about money, that the number is what needs to change, and when it does, life will just click into place.
She doesn't know yet what changing the number changes and what it doesn't. She'll figure out the dollars. It's the other costs. Relationships that can't keep up. The looser self you leave behind around $400,000. The fun you traded for focus. The space that opens between who you were and who you had to become. Not better. Not worse. Just more specific. The machine doesn't care if you're ready or if the deal is fair. It just keeps going every morning. Anyone who shows up, who keeps showing up, past the pointless years, the hard losses, the quiet, anticlimactic milestones, anyone who stays compounds. The money compounds. So does the distance. So does the clarity about what you really wanted all along. The app says $843. It always starts there, and it always will.